since you're not 9 years old, do you ever struggle with balance? Do you struggle with, how do I balance home, life, children, work, sports, recreation, reflection, the church, the club? It's like, do you ever wrestle with balance in all those? Someone once said, life is a struggle for balance. Then you die. But how do you get life balance? Let me suggest to you that balance is the result of your schedule. Life is a byproduct of your schedule. And typically, you determine your schedule. Therefore, by means of logic, you are the person who schedules your balance or your imbalance. You schedule your own imbalance or your own balance. You can plan balance into your life by scheduling the really important things into your life 1 year in advance. The mistake I find executives making is that we get caught up in daily reacting. We basically, on a day-to-day basis, simply react to whatever's coming at us. We react to all those dimensions that are coming at us. Instead of shifting from a daily reactive to an annual proactive. From a daily reactive to an annual proactive. It's when you shift to that annual proactive, that's about the only hope most people who are busy executives only hope for any kind of annual balance or any kind of personal life balance is by scheduling it a year in advance. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand to say, how many of you have annual balance scheduled a year in advance? But I would ask you in your heart of hearts to ask yourself, does that make sense? Instead of just reacting to the stuff coming at you, to proactively looking a year in advance and saying, what are the really important things I want to get done this year? When do I want to do them? And sort of get it, sort of some way proactively, the big important things scheduled a year in advance. Does that make sense to you? It did to me. But how do you go about it? On your table, you have a handout that shows a circle. It's called the Annual Balance Calendar. By the way, also, I don't know if you noticed it yesterday on the table, you also have a handout. It's called the Collection 65, which are the 65 tools developed over the years to help in a wide variety of areas of your life. You're free to take that home and just look at it at your convenience. But I'd like you to focus right now on the Annual Balance Calendar. I'd like to draw it for you. And I'd like to suggest that in your lifetime, you get a flip chart, something like this, and you number it something like a clock. But instead of a clock, it's actually an annual calendar. It's not a yearly calendar, it's actually an annual calendar. What I mean by that is you have an annual calendar that's like 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. It's what are we going to do this year? It's going to be a yearly calendar. But you also, I would encourage you to develop an annual calendar. The annual calendar is what we do every year at this time. Sir, what is your birthday?
February 11th.
February 11th. So you say, okay, every year on February 11th, it really doesn't matter what year it is, February 11th is my birthday. And you can go around and put your birthdays. And many of you have sort of every year at this time, it's so-and-so's birthday or anniversaries, etc. So you keep track of that. But I would suggest to you that on your paper there, I've written several little things that you might consider putting somewhere on your annual calendar. And you remember we talked yesterday at this phase of life. At this phase of my life, how much time do I want to spend doing what? Just at this time of every year for the next 5 years. And you may say, well, the busy season for our particular enterprise is pre-Christmas, starting in around November 1st. In other words, this is our busy season right in here. Every year. For the next 5, 10 years, that's our busy season. And from, let's say, for whatever reason, from April 1st to July 1st. What are the busy seasons of your enterprise, your organization, your corporation, your practice? Then you say, okay, but after that, we've got a slow season that runs from July 1st to September 1st. And then we have a planning season that does this or this, and you basically begin to see there are certain busy seasons and certain slow seasons every year for the next 5 or 10 years. And then you look at the just an alphabetic look, and here are some of the kinds of things you deal with. Your annual career path discussions. In other words, like a lot of people would call your staff evaluations. When do we want that? Well, let's put that in our slow season. Let's put this around September 5th, the annual career path discussion. Then when would you put your birthdays? When would you put the board retreat days? If you have a board, when do you want the board retreat days? Every year for the next 5 years. And then where do you put celebrations, anniversaries at work and at home, due dates for next year's budget? In other words, when do you start planning your budget? When do you have a file cleaning? You say, well, if I don't watch it, my computer gets all jammed up with filing system. I get all stuff in the wrong place or something. Well, in the slow season is when you put your annual filing. Then maintenance cycles. Is there anything you have to do with maintenance of any kind? Milestones list update. I think I may have mentioned yesterday, but each year you want to make a list of milestones for the last year. And maybe that you put between Christmas and New Year's up here when your busy season is over, but it isn't January 1st quite yet, and you look back. So every year for the next 10, 20 years, every year your milestones, you take some time right here to basically look and say, what happened right this year? What did we do right? And celebrate it with yourself, your spouse, your family, with your staff, with your board, to send them a list of what went right, the basic milestones that happened this year that were basically, we did well in this area. And like I said yesterday, nothing motivates like results. To look back on the year and see the results we actually achieved. Not even necessarily what we set out to do, what we said we were going to do, all the hype, but rather what did we actually achieve last year? To put that down. So that every year at this time you have that. And then personal days. One of the things that you want to look at is at this phase of your life, how many personal days do you need? To just plan, to think, to pray, to just serve you personally. By the way, as you go up the organizational pyramid, the further you go up, the more planning days you need. If you're a private in the military, you don't need any planning days at all because you just say yes, sir, and do whatever the sergeant tells you. But when you're a sergeant, you need planning days to plan what are we going to tell those privates to do. But you don't need nearly as much as when you're a colonel or a general. Because a general's perspective is that most of the general's time, thinking, processing is actually planning. What are we going to do? What's our strategy? Where do we go from here? Who do we take? What do we do? So as you become the president of your organization, what you're looking at is a high percentage of your time is planning. So at this phase of your life, it's very different than it was when you were 25 or 35 or 45, perhaps. At that point, then you say, okay, how much time do I need? Do I need a day a month to plan? Do I need 2 days a month? What percentage of your time do you need for planning? Do you need 5%? Do you need 20%, which is a day? Should you take 20% of your planning time, or, of your time, 20% to plan, 80% of your work? Well, that's a day a week. So do you set aside every Tuesday for planning? Just as a rule of thumb? Or do you say, I think 2 days a month I really need to set aside, only 2.5%, but I think I need about 2.5% for planning. Ask yourself if you're sitting there, how much time at this point in my life do I need for planning? And so you say, okay, I want to take a day a month for planning. Clock around for planning. And then how much personal days? How many personal days? How many family days? And a part of when Greg asked me to come and be with you, if I were going to talk to just presidents, I'd have talked about something very different. But I was basically, when he said spouses were going to be here too, I thought, you know, it's important to talk about something that both would be interested in, both would find it interesting and important. And there's very few things that I've found couples enjoyed chatting about more than balance. When are you going to have some time? When are we going to have some family time? When are we going to have some vacation time? So you basically ask yourself, at this phase of our marital relationship, how many couple weekends do we need? Or how many long weekends do we need? And you say, right now, I think where we are in the company, where we are in a marriage, etc., I think probably 4-day weekends, often a romantic setting, would be massively different and positive compared to what we have had for the last 10 years. So you say, okay, when will that be? Okay, let's take one here, January, one in May, or April rather, one in the first week in July, and one before the busy season starts over here. All right? And then how about vacations with the family, with the children, etc.? All right, at this phase of our development, like we talked yesterday, at this phase of our development, at our age, let's take 2 weeks in August, right here, to have family. And then before the kids go back to school, let's take a week right here. And then let's take a week skiing or something like that in, like Bob mentioned, in Aspen or wherever you want to go. And let's take 3 family vacations, a week and then a summer 2 weeks. Don't come to Scottsdale, Arizona in the summer for those 2 weeks. And then another thing is planning days. Well, we talked about planning days. Predictable emotional valleys. Look back over your career and say, in what season of the year do I typically get discouraged? Pastors in the Midwest, in the snow country, it's always February, January, February. I get calls from a lot of pastors in the snow belt in January, February. Say, I'm not sure I'm going to stay in the ministry. I'm not sure I'm going to stay up here, et cetera. It's a predictable thing. They've been in snow from mid-November through here. The Christmas rush is over. People go skiing. Their income is down. It's a time in which there's a predictable emotional valley. There's another one for pastors right in August, late August to September. Everybody goes on vacation. Half the congregation is gone. The giving is gone. The fall rush hasn't started. There's a predictable emotional valley right there. Where is your predictable emotional valley? Make a note of it so that when it hits, it doesn't surprise you. You say, oh yeah, okay, this is it. Let's take a break right here. Let's look at our milestones for the year. Let's take a break. Let's go away for a few days, and let's get back on it. And then quiet times. Are there any times you need to get away and sort of begin writing your autobiography? Like I say, the memories book for your family for the next 10 generations. Special events, company picnics, etc. Every year for the next 5 years, where does the company picnic go? It doesn't go here and it doesn't go here. Where does it go? And then team events, team come-togethers. Teams come together best in a sort of a recreational getaway kind of environment. I was asked by John Ashcroft when he was the Attorney General to come and spend some time with his team. And it was basically, he said, Bob, we've got 40 attorneys who have never been together. It was right after 9/11. He said they've never been together, they've never worked together, they're not a team. He said we need to get them into a team so that if something happens like that, they'll work together as a team instead of strangers. So we went down to Quantico, shot actually fully automatic guns, put on masks, went into buildings with paint guns, and drove cars as fast as we could around the track, and our team against their team. And fortunately, he didn't like this at all. But our team beat John Ashcroft's team by 1 point. He didn't like that. It was not fun to have him lose at anything. So anyway, but what I'm saying is, your team may come together once a year at a totally different level to get away, get on a bus, go somewhere, play something, climb something, take on something as a team. You can make more progress as a team once a year by getting away and doing something fun than you maybe can working in the dental practice for the next 5 years. Just getting away actually often helps. So when do you want to have that team getaway? Do you begin to see why your life is so, it's difficult to find balance. But here's the thing. By planning it a year in advance and getting ready for it so everything has a place and everything has time, it lets you relax at a totally different level than if it's all hitting you just spontaneously. It's like you don't have track of it. And then what you do is you take this annual planning calendar and connect it to your yearly planning calendar. You basically take this and then you take your next year's planning calendar in about November. I encourage you to put this on in November. You look at this and say, okay, for next year, what all have I got to do? Well, okay, next year, the actual dates for our milestone is actually December 28th on next year's calendar. And then our annual getaway for the couples getaway is let's make it January the 13th through the 17th. And let's make my birthday still the 11th. And then you basically put those actual dates on your actual yearly calendar. And all of a sudden you feel like, hey, the year's planned out at a big picture, high priority level. And then let the world fill in the rest of it. But you know what I found? Whenever someone comes to you and says, hey, could we get together and do this or that? And when you use these words, I'm sorry, I'm already committed during that time. Could we make it a little later? Could we make it a little earlier? I have yet to have anyone say to me, well, what have you got planned? Can't you cancel that? Because what I've got in mind is important. So no one ever asks you to change your agenda, except occasionally someone dies or has something come up you just can't do. But I would encourage you, never cancel an important point in your life. Never cancel it. But here's the kicker. You can reschedule it. If you have 4 days with your husband and wife in a retreat setting thing, and someone dies, a relative dies, don't cancel that 4 days away. Simply reschedule it a little bit later. It keeps the balance in your system. Now, in each phase of your life, it's important to see that this refines itself. It's a refining concept. Sometimes it's complicating because you buy another company or you start another company, and it sort of changes the dates a little bit. Get out a new flip chart, put a new one of these annual planning calendars. Sometimes it's simplifying, where you sell a company, certain things go away. It's evolving. But this profoundly simple annual planning calendar is available to help you restore balance in your life. And it's available to you 24 hours a day when you're feeling out of balance, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. For the rest of your life. When Greg asked me what I'd like to do here, I said, ideally, I'd like to just come and answer questions, whatever anyone has, because that's what I do, is I meet with clients and just answer questions or try to bring perspective. And we decided I should say something first and then answer questions. But today, I'd like to see, in the time we have left, feel free to ask anything about the annual planning calendar. But I'd also like to give you permission to ask anything about anything in terms of personal development or organizational development. If we were to have a day just by ourselves in a retreat setting, a consultation day, what would be the pressing thing on your heart that you'd care to share in public? I'd like to help you in the most productive way I could in what limited time we may have together, because this may be the last time we ever have together in God's economy. So any question you've got, feel free to ask about this or frankly about anything. So.